Right now, you have more than any human who ever lived. You have food in your fridge, a roof over your head, medicine that works, and the entire sum of human knowledge sitting in your pocket. A king from 500 years ago couldn't get a painkiller. You can order one in 2 minutes. And yet, something feels off. Not always, but often enough that you notice it. You're tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. You're connected to everyone and lonely at the same time. You scroll through the highlight reels of other people's lives and feel somehow behind. On what exactly, you couldn't say. Which raises a question that sounds almost offensive to ask out loud. Were the people who had almost nothing actually happier than we are? For about 300,000 years, humans lived in small bands, 20 to 50 people usually. Everyone knew everyone. You were born into a group, you lived in that group, and when you died, the same people who watched you learn to walk would be the ones standing over you at the end. There was no career ladder, no inbox, no algorithm telling you that someone else's life looked better than yours. You woke up, you found food, you sat around a fire at night with the people you loved, and you went to sleep. That was it. For most of human history, that was just life. And before we assume that sounds miserable, it's worth asking, what does the evidence actually say? Here's what's strange. When researchers study the few remaining hunter-gatherer communities on Earth today, groups that still live something close to the original human lifestyle, they don't find misery, they find something that doesn't fit the story we've been telling ourselves about progress. They find people who work fewer hours than we do, sleep more than we do, spend more time with their families than we do, and report levels of life satisfaction that are, by any measure, not lower than ours. Some studies suggest they're higher. So how is that possible? And what does it mean for us? Let's start with work, because this is where the numbers get genuinely surprising. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins looked at the Kung San people of the Kalahari Desert and did something simple. He timed them. He found they spent roughly 15 to 20 hours a week acquiring food. Not 40, not 60, 15 to 20. The rest of the time was spent resting, talking, playing, making music, and doing basically nothing productive at all. And they didn't seem bothered by it one bit. Sahlins called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society, not because they had a lot, but because they wanted little, and what they wanted, they could get. Then there's the body. Skeletal remains from ancient hunter-gatherers tell a surprisingly consistent story. Before agriculture arrived, the average human was taller, had stronger bones, healthier teeth, and fewer signs of chronic disease than the farmers who came after them. When humans settled down and started growing grain, which most history books present as one of our greatest achievements, something unexpected happened. People got shorter. Nutritional deficiencies appeared. Infectious disease spread faster because populations were suddenly dense and sedentary. The average lifespan in early farming communities actually dropped. Anthropologist Clark Spencer Larson has spent decades studying this transition through bones and teeth. His conclusion is uncomfortable. The shift to agriculture made individual lives harder, not easier. We got civilization. We also got back pain, tooth decay, and a working week that never really ends. But here's where it gets more complicated and more interesting. A lot of what made ancient life good wasn't about hours or health. It was about something harder to measure. Belonging. In a band of 50 people, you mattered. Not in an abstract, inspirational quote kind of way. You actually practically mattered. If you didn't show up to the hunt, someone went hungry. If you were sick, the people who loved you sat with you, not because they scheduled it, but because they were right there. You had a role. You had a place. Your existence was woven into the lives of other people in a way that modern life almost never replicates. Psychologist Laurie Santos, who studies human happiness at Yale, puts it plainly. The single strongest predictor of human well-being across every culture ever studied isn't wealth or status or achievement. It's the quality of your relationships. And for 300,000 years, humans lived inside relationships so tight they would feel claustrophobic to us now. But they also felt like home. Now, before this turns into a fantasy about going back to caves, there's something important to say. Ancient life was not a paradise. If you had a bad tooth, it could kill you. If you broke a leg in the wrong place at the wrong time, that was probably it. Children died, a lot. Women died in childbirth. Violence between groups was common. Life expectancy was low. Not because people aged fast, but because so many didn't make it to adulthood at all. The ancient humans who did survive to 40 or 50 were often doing quite well physically, but getting there was brutal. So no, the answer to the question isn't go live in a forest. But here's what is worth sitting with. The things that made ancient humans happy, tight community, clear purpose, physical movement, enough rest, time in nature, face-to-face connection, none of those things required civilization. They're not products of progress. They're features of the human animal. They were baked in over hundreds of thousands of years. They're what your brain and body were designed to run on.
and almost none of them are default features of modern life. We built cities and economies and the internet, and somewhere in there we quietly removed most of the conditions that made human beings feel good. Not on purpose, it just happened. Progress optimized for productivity and forgot to check in with the organism doing the producing. The result is a species that has never had more, and reports being more anxious, more lonely, more burned out than at almost any point in recorded history. So, were ancient humans happier than we are? Probably not always, and definitely not in the ways that would let them survive what we survive. They didn't have the things that modern suffering survivable: medicine, safety, opportunity, the ability to reinvent yourself somewhere new. But in the quiet ways, the daily texture of feeling known, feeling needed, feeling like your life had a shape that made sense, the evidence suggests they had something we've spent centuries building toward, and somehow still haven't found. You have more than any human who ever lived. The fridge, a roof, the medicine, the knowledge in your pocket, and the thing that made humans feel okay for 300,000 years, that feeling of mattering to a small group of people who would notice if you didn't show up, that's the one thing you have to build yourself, from scratch, in a world that wasn't really designed for it, which might explain a lot. Else ancient humans had figured out that we've quietly lost. There's a lot more where this came from.